Hi, folks. It's Tiernan McElwain, and I'm joined by some really awesome folks from the developmental preschool and daycare in Laramie, Wyoming. And we're going to talk today about promoting children's success, building relationships, and creating supportive environments. And I've already made a mistake, so we can just kind of let ourselves hang out and be loose with this. Mr. Charles, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
Oh, not too bad. How about you?
I'm doing well. What's the age group of the young people in your class?
I have 3 and 4-year-olds.
Okay. And then we have Jacqueline, who is a curriculum coordinator for the developmental preschool and daycare. Jacqueline, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, of course. I'm really happy to.
And I know that you're just feeling like you're treading water there because you have so many absences to fill in for, but how are things going for you?
Good. We are getting by, and I'm really thankful for all these wonderful teachers who just put their neck out there and do the best they can every day because they're also scraping by.
Yeah.
So,
and I want to say hi to Morgan too, who joins us from the Yellow Jackets room there. Hey, Morgan.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. And how was your day in the classroom today?
Good. Definitely, you can feel the activity from everything going on in the world right now. So
Yeah.
kids are excited.
Yeah. I'm curious, and any of you can weigh in on this, but we've had so much stress in 2020, and we've had our self-care, bit where we had our presentation on that, and I know each of you had a chance to kind of look at some of that. But how do you think children are doing in general? The kids in your classes, do they seem to be aware of the stress? How are they doing?
I honestly think mine are because yesterday was a weird day, like with all of our kids. And I looked at Zoe, my co-teacher, at one point and was like, I wonder if they just subconsciously know other things are happening. And I think they are just kind of just from external, I believe in that type of thing, at least like energies that something is kind of up. And one of them pointed out yesterday that it's getting dark outside and they don't have an inkling of a clue of what daylight savings time is, but they were still able to, one of them was able to recognize that it's getting dark outside. So I bet they definitely know that things are happening, but
yeah,
on a different level.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, I tend to overlook the details that some of these children pay attention to, and it's amazing. Morgan, what do you think? How's your classroom? Do they seem to be aware of the level of stress around them?
I absolutely think that children are vulnerable to outside emotions. However, I think that sometimes I look at the kids and realize that they're handling the pandemic better than most adults. So I honestly think that it's becoming a norm for them, and like the expectations that like people were wearing masks now, and like it's almost weird when they're not. And
yeah.
growing up in this environment, it's a good reality check for me to remember that like this is now their norm and this is what they expect. And so it's just moving on from day to day.
Yeah, I think that's so true. They adapt much quicker than I have. I still walk out of my car like every place I go and forget to take a mask and have to go back to my car.
Yeah.
So again, thanks for joining me. We are talking about the pyramid model for social and emotional development. And of course, this stuff is online for folks at the CEFL, CSEFEL. If you search that on Google, you can find it, or you can type in pyramid model implementation. And there's just amazing, wonderful resources out there for free. And we're talking about the base of this pyramid. And the pyramid essentially says, if we focus efforts at the base, an effective workforce and positive relationships and supportive environments, we're going to need fewer intensive interventions at the top, where we have a child that needs a specific intervention plan, assessment, and implementation plan for that. So we're still going to have those children, but hopefully if we really work on these responsive relationships like we're going to talk about today, we begin to find ways to leverage those relationships and support children in their development so that they learn how to express themselves appropriately rather than with more challenging behaviors or dangerous behaviors. So we start by talking about building positive relationships and by making deposits. And here, I got to say, it says make a 5-to-1 positive to negative interventions or interactions with children, and I don't live up to this standard, I got to say. How does it work for you folks in the classroom, Charles and Morgan, when it comes to, this idea of trying to maintain positivity, but we also have children that simply demand attention in ways that we can't ignore, and it requires an intervention. So how do you kind of be positive despite the fact that we've got kids pulling for that negative attention sometimes? Charles, you want to start with that?
Yeah. When I notice first off that a kid is starting to want attention but in a negative way, I guess I try to sometimes comment how someone else is doing something positively, so then they can be a person as a leader and like set as an example. But I know I'm not as good also at sometimes maintaining that 5-to-1 positive negative ratio, because there are some kids just demand a lot of attention, and most of the time it's in a negative way. So it's just trying to find those moments when they do something positive, then giving them that attention then. Like Cash, he one of our kids, he has always difficulty cleaning. He likes to just stand around, and so then generally what we've been doing is, well, then you sit out and you are the last one then to wash your hands before we get ready to eat. And now we're trying to, whenever he does clean, just really affirm that, hey, look at you, you're cleaning up, that is what you're supposed to be doing. And then if anything, looking at other people and being like, all right, you're doing something good, so we're gonna give you positive attention, and trying to get that example going, I guess.
Yeah, I love that. And I've made the mistake on the other side of that coin, literally, where I was at a circle time with the classroom, and one of the kids was doing something with his legs, and I said, hey, keep your legs out of the circle. And so like 5 other kids, their legs immediately shot out into the middle of the circle. I'm like, okay, Mr. Mack, real smart.
Yeah.
Morgan, what do you think about or how do you respond when you've got kids pulling for that negative and you want to maintain the positivity with them?
So I would say, honestly, after I learned about the 5-to-1 ratio, I think that it made me think of it differently, because I was always so focused on kids have to have safe bodies and safe words, and if I let a fire grow, it's going to get bigger. And so I was always focused on the negative all of the time. And I think that when someone finally told me, like, hey, it's supposed to be a 5-to-1 ratio, it made me really think about which kids in my class are not receiving attention that are doing positive actions. And I think that I've definitely built other relationships with children in my class that are, and instead of I don't know, going on take the breakfast cart back or something like that requires you to leave the classroom, instead of me taking children who are having a difficulty during the day and taking them to remove them from the situation to change their behavior, I'm taking kids that are making positive actions. And I feel like that's definitely made a big difference in my day in focusing on the positivity instead of the negativity. However, I would say that I'm definitely not always at the 5-to-1, and it's something I'm trying to work for.
Yeah, I can't think that we deserve to hold ourselves to a level of expectation of perfection. I mean, that wouldn't be fair of us or anyone. So I'm glad to hear, these stories of, we notice our own shortcomings, but we also, I tend to think of it like redirecting myself gently. And I want to redirect myself with the gentleness of a feather falling on a pillow, meaning I don't want to be judging myself harshly, because that leads to shame, which doesn't really lead to change. It leads to freezing up and not being able to see possibilities. So, I mean, I hear you folks talking about, okay, I'm going to try and, I'm going to problem solve this issue, or I'm going to try some things differently, take different children with me when we take the cart back to the kitchen, and see how that works. And I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of that. And I think that level of reflection is really what's necessary when it comes to taking care of kids, as a parent, as a caregiver, as a teacher. And Jacqueline, I know I visited your classroom years ago when you were working as a teacher, and now you're more of an administrative role. But how did you think about that positive attention piece in your work with kids, and what do you tell folks about that?
Well, I just think that it really shapes what you're expecting out of children, the kind of attention that you're giving them. If you are always focusing on the negative things, everyone just hears those negative things all the time. And so that just becomes it almost becomes their mantra too, like, this is what I am, so this is what I'll be. But if you flip that mindset and you're focusing on all the positive things that you see them do, then they start believing that they can do all of these good things and they're going to get the appropriate attention for it. And then they strive to become that. So I don't know, it's kind of it works out in your favor because then they become the little humans that you're trying to help create. So
Right.
I think that's the biggest takeaway I got from all that in all the years that I taught.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I mean, you see what you're looking for, right? If I'm a prison warden, I'm going to find kids misbehaving. If I'm a play partner, I'm finding ways to play with kids and have fun in our environment. And I got to say, you know, I've seen people at DPDC doing that regularly. You know, I was outside with Sierra and Morgan for a little while today, and they're running and chasing kids in the hugest playground I've ever seen at a place, by the way. I love it. And there's Charles dancing with us in the classroom and just showing us how to shake it with different songs. And it's great stuff because it engages children in fun, and they're getting attention for participating in something that's rewarding in and of itself. So we're giving attention to those things we want to see. That's the important piece from this. Let me get next slide. If I can figure out how to do it. There we go. So the next piece here, we get a chance to talk a little bit about positive interactions and what they look like. And one of the things I'm really trying to pay, I think I'm trying to pay better attention to it, is the nonverbal signals I get from children. I had a child today who just was so excited. He'd never met me before, but he just came literally bouncing up to the door when I walked into a classroom. And, you know, but he also gave me appropriate space. But here I am seeing this as excitement, and I'm labeling it, or his teacher actually did it. She did a great job. She said, "Oh, you're really excited to meet our new friends." And she introduced us and helped him pronounce our names. And it was just neat to see that we can have a child express that level nonverbal of excitement. The teacher would narrate that for him. And then we could also start to get to know each other because of the greetings that she made. So we're acknowledging the child's communication, nonverbal, and we're also greeting that child by name, which are the top two on here. Morgan, I saw you do some really neat work with one of our students in the hallway the other day, and, you know, just kind of picking him up playfully, even though he was having a rough time and being a little bit oppositional. But I really saw you being playful with him with the gross motor contact and lots of fun touch. What were your thoughts, or what was your experience of that?
I think that people are hesitant to, at first, to give physical contact when a child was in an escalated state, because I thought that it would increase that behavior. And I've learned that a lot of times that they want that physical touch and they want that like calm rock demeanor in terms of like, you're my safe place and that's okay. And I think that I wouldn't achieve that if I didn't have physical contact with kids. I also think that sometimes I have some kids that want an interaction together, but they don't want to touch. And so we'll have like an activity we do together daily or a task that is completed. And like, that's our one-on-one time. And they really like look forward to that during the day. I think that when it comes to the situation that you're referring to, when I was outside of my classroom and I was with a kid who was pretty escalated at the time, and we almost turned it into a game of like, oh, I bet you can't push a wall over. I bet you can't do 10 push-ups. And like, just like showing him that like he can be strong in a different way than physical violence, and showing him that it's okay to be strong with your own body, with yourself in a safe way instead of against peers. And so I definitely think that physical touch has really changed the way I look at my interactions with my kids.
It was great, but it was if you think about conscious discipline, which some of you may have had training in or seen in the past, those are I love you rituals that involve touch, eye contact, playfulness, and some verbal connection of some kind. Those are I love you rituals where we get a chance to connect with children in really intimate and fun and appropriate ways. tell me about your experience of that idea of these positive interactions as you're moving around a classroom like that, Jacqueline.
I think a little bit like Morgan. Well, I started off with some really hard kids when I was teaching, and I didn't really, like, I was only focusing on all of the hard kids, and they were stealing all of my attention. And it basically, I had a very good mentor, and she told me that I need to start like dividing my time evenly amongst kids and make sure that my interactions were positive more than negative. And so that really shaped how I've always been really good at connecting with kids, especially the hard ones. So I like pushed myself out of my comfort zone to connect with the kids who are never on my radar, I guess.
Yeah.
That's when I became very intentional about trying to make sure that I wasn't always just with my hard kids, and taking those turns with the other teachers in my classroom when we were in those hard situations. So we each got a chance to build a relationship with those kids. So it wasn't always those kids relying on me individually. But I think it's good to have those relationships with every single kid in a classroom. So not just standing and hovering and like being in their space, but actually being with them in the moment and knowing what's going on.
Charles, what are your thoughts about these interactions on here?
One way I try to relate is I take a quote from The Help, and even though one of my kids, they may be acting negatively, in The Help, Aibileen always tells her kids he was kind, he was smart, and he was important. And I will look at some of my kids, like yesterday I was out on the playground with one of them, he pushed down some girls, and I looked at him and I said, you are a good kid, you just sometimes make poor decisions. And that makes me sad, it makes me frustrated, so I'm here to help you to make good decisions, so you can be the best you can be. And I do try really hard to make that effort to show them, like you just said with Mr. Rogers, I like you just the way you are. It's not, I try to express to all of them, you are not a bad kid, you are a good kid, you just sometimes make poor decisions, but we all do that, so it's okay, and I'm here to help you make the good ones. So that's one way I guess I try to have positive interactions with all of my kids, is to show them that you are smart and you are good, just sometimes we mess up and it's okay.
And that's something I want to continue to think about, is how we help children maintain dignity and power despite the fact that they may have made those mistakes that Charles talked about. And I appreciate you bringing that up. And here, it all adds up. We make these deposits on the left, we make these withdrawals on the right. And I want us to look at this and think about what are the ones that are probably my go-tos when it comes to deposits, and what is your go-to when it comes to withdrawals? Jacqueline, when you look at these in terms of deposits and withdrawals, what are your go-tos?
I don't know. I feel like I'm really good at giving kids wait time, modeling, active listening. Like, those are probably like the things that I find myself doing the most.
Yeah.
Just really trying to be present with that kid and get to know like what is going on here, and how can I help you fix or change their own behavior to be more positive, I guess.
Right. And what's the withdrawal one that's tough for you to stay away from?
So I worked so hard on this for years and years and years, because my last curriculum coordinator was the best role model ever about how to positively phrase things for children, but I still catch myself every once in a while saying don't.
Yeah.
And no. Pretty good. Like, I'm a pretty calm, patient person, so I don't ever usually resort to yelling or loud voice or anything like that. But yeah, sometimes it just slips out. I have my own children, so I find myself doing it more with my own children than I do other people's children, but
Yeah.
like frustrated mom in me. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes our children manage to bring the best out of us, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like if anyone ever saw me with my own children, they'd be like, "Oh man."
Yeah. Morgan, what do you think with these?
I think definitely reflection for a deposit with children, something that I'm pretty good at.
Nice.
Be able to have that conversation with him. And I also, let's see, withdrawals. I think I'm pretty bad with intimidating requests. And
Okay.
I try to phrase it in a way that's like, well, if you choose to do this, you choose to not participate in this. You know, and that's hard for kids because then that just increases the negative behavior. And so it's definitely something I want to work on. And then my classroom is very echoey and it gets very loud very fast. And I feel
Yeah.
bad kids can't always hear. So definitely using a loud voice, especially in our classroom.
Yeah.
And intimidating to the kids, you know, and so trying to work on that and trying to keep my kids at a level in terms of where that isn't needed, I think it will also help the function of our classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such a good point.
Sorry.
What were you
They're
saying?
not conducive to
No, it's not.
loud children. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Tiernan, can you
Yeah.
explain a little bit self-talk and parallel talk a little
You
bit
bet.
more?
So self-talk, for example, like I did some of that with kids today just to demonstrate some positive self-talk. Like I would build a tower with these kids and I would have somebody knock it down after they asked politely if they could. We even taught them how to knock things down safely because they're operating kind of at a toddler level when toddlers are kind of destructive in nature, which is fine. And I want them to experiment with that. But the self-talk I was teaching them at the time was, oh, I can build it again. So I would demonstrate that. I would have them knock it over and say, oh, I can build it again. And then eventually I started hearing children say the same thing. Oh, I can build it again. Or we help them kind of have that positive talk about themselves like, no, you can do it. You can, and helping them say, I can do it. So you're giving them a way to talk about themselves, to reference their strengths and so forth. The parallel talk is kind of similar to that in that, you know, I might talk about my own experience to parallel what they're going through. So, you know, oh, I'm really sad that somebody knocked my tower down, or when I notice somebody else is going through that emotion, I might convey it for me so that I can be the target of the interaction or intervention rather than putting the child in that place. And it helps them feel like, okay, Mr. Mack is paying attention. He's validating what I'm doing and validating what I'm experiencing. So these are ones that show children they're understood, and they're a little more complex in some ways because we have to kind of be taking on this role of helping them experiment with these different ways of thinking about themselves and others. Does that make some sense, Jacqueline?
Yep, it does. Thank you.
Great. These ideas about making deposits on kind of a broader level, giving compliments liberally, playing with children, following their lead. Morgan, this is something I saw from you today, was following the lead of children outside. What are your thoughts about those types of interactions and the deposits you make as a part of that, Morgan?
I think I children's interests and like what they're comfortable with, and so referring to outside playtimes, especially, I have an opportunity to have playtime alone with my children on the playground for a while, for I don't know, maybe half an hour a day, and it's really good because every single day we come up with a new game and new rules, and they make it, and I think I just like get to learn a lot about their personalities.
I love that example because it also speaks to sharing power with children. And I think that's something I'm looking forward to working on more during my work with developmental preschool, because we don't often think about how we share power with kids in preschool. They should have some power. They should have some voice. They should be active agents in determining their environment and their relationships. And I hear you saying exactly that, Morgan, that I'm going to let them make some rules. I'm going to let them bring their own culture into this, their own thoughts into this. And I think that's a beautiful way to make these deposits, because we really, what you're saying with all of that is, I value who you are right now. And I love it. Playing with children, following their lead, such a great example. This next one, it just kind of brings home that notion of giving children attention when they are engaging in appropriate behaviors, and then monitoring our behavior to ensure that we are spending more time using positives and less time giving directions or correcting inappropriate behavior. And I go back to thinking about what Jacqueline, you said a little bit ago, where you said, I had to kind of change my tune and really spread my attention around the classroom more. What did you do to monitor yourself to see how that was working or not?
I actually at first used to tally. Like I used to carry not a clipboard, but just a little note card kind of
I
thing.
love it.
And I had every kid's name on it. And I tried to make sure that I was getting at least 2 interactions with every kid during the day. Some of them
Wow.
obviously were getting more, but just basically being aware of who I was giving my attention to in that way. And then it just kind of naturally became habit.
I can totally see that happening. I love that. I've never heard of anybody doing that, Jacqueline. It's so cool. And I can just imagine the sense of like confidence and competence growing in those relationships with those children because you were starting to get to know them better as a result of these interactions, I would guess, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And then just kind of falling into, not necessarily falling into, but finding a way into a relationship that was sustained through ongoing connection. That's such a great example. I don't know why nobody's ever talked about that before. Did you come up with that one on your own?
Yeah, I did because I don't know. I wanted something that I could just shove in my pocket and not be distracting to me.
Yeah.
People had suggested some other stuff, but I was like, I'm going to come up with something that's a little easier for me because I don't like to be distracted when I'm engaged or when I'm like with kids.
Gosh, I love that.
So
I love it. And okay, so this is going to be our magic moment. We're going to say anybody who tries this and puts a class comment for this video, and Morgan and Charles, you're already in on it, so you can enter a comment about trying this. Just spreading positive attention around the class and doing some tracking around it, whatever you decide. Anybody who puts a comment in the class comments for the Google Classroom will be entered for a drawing for one of the Amazon gift cards we have. So I love this idea so much. I want to give people a chance to experiment with it. And again, here I want to highlight again what Morgan was talking about earlier with regard to the physical contact piece and using that as a positive way to connect and encourage and help children connect with us. Individualizing positive feedback and encouragement. And then this last one, I love it, encouraging other adults and peers to use positive feedback and encouragement. So I appreciate each of you for your craziness about kids. And thank you again for joining me today. Charles, thanks for joining me. Morgan, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And Jacqueline, thanks for your time today.
yeah, thank you for setting this all up.
What's that?
Thanks for setting this all up.
Yeah. Have a good evening, everybody.
All right, you too.
Bye.